political bombshell reshaping the race for the White House. Just months before the November election, President Biden is ending his re-election campaign, setting the stage for a heated and unpredictable election season. We're following all the breaking developments right now on NBC10 Boston.
Tonight, Joe Biden leaves the race. After a political career spanning 5 decades, the president announces he will not seek a second term and ends his re-election bid. In a statement posted on X, the president said in part, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Now, shortly after issuing that statement, the president made it known he wants Vice President Kamala Harris to take his spot at the top of the ticket. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday, everybody. I'm Corey Smith, joined in studio by NBC10 political reporter Matt Pritchard. Matt, no better way to say it, but what a day.
Every single day, it's another political headline, and this is as big as it gets. The announcement comes after weeks of concern from Democrats that Biden would not be able to effectively campaign against former President Trump and govern the country for another 4 years.
We have team coverage for you this evening, including reaction from Democrats, the Trump campaign, and local voters.
But first, let's take a closer look at the major announcement and what happens next. A historic moment in American politics. Despite weeks of denials and claims he couldn't be pushed out of the 2024 race, President Joe Biden bowing to pressure from inside his party just under a month since his disastrous debate performance.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look.
In a letter posted to social media, Biden touting his first-term accomplishments, writing, quote, "America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today," and immediately endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris.
This is not the road to take, so I am shocked that, and I feel like he may have been bullied into stepping down.
I think for once, as a Republican, I'm happy to sit back and kind of watch their party in disarray.
A strategist on both sides of the aisle reacting to the move, with Democrats painting a chaotic picture.
We need to bring in people who were going to sit this race out. This is a bad look. This is politically a bad idea.
Republicans watching to see how the Trump campaign will respond.
He was up against Hillary Clinton. I think, whether you agree or disagree with the antics that he took towards her, I don't think this is uncharted territory for Trump going after her.
As that conversation heats up in political circles, analysts see a difficult climb ahead for Democrats, cobbling together a campaign around Vice President Harris and putting to rest concerns that she isn't ready to be atop the Democratic ticket.
We've all followed that narrative for a few years now, where the knock on her was she's not ready for prime time. Now, all of a sudden, she's potentially the party's nominee for president.
With all eyes shifting to the DNC a month from now in Chicago.
Starting from scratch, it's a whole new race. It is now a dead sprint. Donald Trump versus a player to be named later.
Matt, for days we heard reports that the Biden family was sort of seeking this off-ramp for the president. Still, though, were you surprised to hear some Democrats saying that they were actually shocked by this news?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost, they said that they were not surprised, but they were shocked at this. It was the longest lead up to this moment, and you could feel that groundswell continuing to build over the weeks that passed since that debate performance that we talked about there in the story. Certainly, a lot of people thought this is where we would end up, but it's still shocking when you see an incumbent president decide to not seek re-election again, but Democrats are telling me they feel like this gives them a much better chance at winning the White House in November.
But in your piece, we heard from political strategist Greta Van Zandt that bad idea politically. What are some of maybe the pitfalls that do arrive now that Kamala Harris could ultimately be at the top of the ticket?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that people have not been sold on Kamala Harris over the course of the first term for the Biden-Harris administration. She was put in charge of the border at one point. That's been something that conservatives have critiqued her over for years now at this point. So it's going to be interesting if she can sort of cobble together that coalition of Democrats that have a positive outlook on her and think she's the person that can lead the country for the next 4 years.
All right, we are 2/3 of your at-issue team. Let's go ahead and make it a triumvirate and bring in NBC10 Boston political commentator Sue O'Connell. Sue, let's get your initial reaction to the announcement and the timing.
Well, I wish they'd stop doing things when I'm at the beach, because watching it ripple down the shoreline of Crane Beach today with people being both surprised and not surprised, as I was at this announcement. Surprised, of course, because for the past 10 months or so, I've been telling anyone who asks me in the dog park, on the street, Do I think that Biden would be replaced on the ticket? And I kept saying it was highly unlikely that the Democrats were going to get what they get and not get upset. And of course, not surprised because of the daily tap, 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 tap of the drum of one Democratic lawmaker after another coming out publicly calling for Biden to get out. So it was clear by midweek last week that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi was turning that drumbeat into a full-fledged orchestra, and Biden's announcement today was the only way he could get that music to stop.
Well, Sue, Kamala Harris' first task here will be to name a vice president. We know that. There's already several names that have been floated around, including some swing state governors. Do you expect her to go that direction and pick someone from a battleground state, much like Donald Trump did with J.D. Vance out of Ohio?
Yeah, I think since the argument to Joe Biden to step aside was electability, Kamala Harris has got to do everything she can to demonstrate that she can win. And the swing state polls, especially that Michigan poll from this weekend, I think was the final bit of data that convince the president to retire his run. So I think if it is Harris, the VP will have to be from a swing state or be able to speak to a constituency that is important in those swing states.
All right, Sue O'Connell live for us in the newsroom. Sue, we will check in with you in just a little bit.
Now over to the other side of the aisle. Former President Donald Trump has already given his take on Biden's withdrawal.
Yeah, some of his allies are even calling on the president to resign completely. NBC 10's Darren Botello in studio with what they're saying on the Republican side of things. Darren?
Well, I'm sure you're both not surprised here, but the Republicans are saying everything from he was the worst president to he's not fit to serve as president. The Speaker of the House also saying Biden has now invalidated the votes of millions of people. From former President Donald Trump to House Speaker Mike Johnson, top Republicans are sounding off on Sunday about President Joe Biden ending his bid for a second term in the White House. The former president taking to his Truth Social platform, saying in part, quote, crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve. Then he spoke with NBC News during a phone interview saying Joe Biden is the worst president in the history, adding that if he's elected in November, he'll, quote, fix what Biden has done. Speaker Johnson picking up Trump's sentiments from there, posting on X, formerly known as Twitter, at this unprecedented juncture in American history, we must be clear about what just happened. The Democrat Party forced the Democrat nominee off the ballot just over 100 days before the election, having invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans who selected Joe Biden to be the Democrat nominee for president. The self-proclaimed party of democracy has proven exactly the opposite. All right, we should also add that NBC News also spoke with a senior Trump advisor saying the campaign actually preferred Biden to stay in the race because that's the matchup they've been planning for. So we'll talk more about that tonight at 11. Also talk about how Trump is going to benefit from Biden dropping out. Also how he'll be affected negatively. Again, all coming up tonight at 11 o'clock. Back to you.
All right, Darren Botello live for us in the studio. Darren, we do appreciate it. So we know how Democrats feel. We know how Republicans feel. What matters most is how voters feel about President Biden dropping out of this race.
Yeah, that's right. NBC 10's Jennifer Sanguano continuing our team coverage live in Boston. Jennifer, what are you hearing out there on the street?
Well, some voters say today they're not so surprised, especially after recent talks amongst those members of the Democratic Party. Now, they hope that this decision opens up the path for a new candidate with renewed energy for these elections.
I think we knew this was maybe coming. It's hard when you're in that position with that much power to step outside yourself and see kind of the reality for what it is.
The announcement some were already expecting is here. President Biden is stepping aside from the 2024 presidential election this afternoon, and some voters like Jeff say they saw this coming this week.
I was expecting it. I know I'm sure it was a very difficult decision for Biden to take. This is something that he's been aspiring for his whole life. Serving the country, but I think it was the right one. It was a selfless choice.
After halting debate performance against the now Republican Party nominee, former President Donald Trump, some say this was the best decision.
He needs to give somebody else a chance. He's forgetting he's getting up there in age and making mistakes on his words.
Once I saw some of the bigwigs in the party, Pelosi and Schumer and those guys announcing that they think he should go, I figured he would do the right thing.
Now they hope this brings a new opportunity for the Democratic Party to choose a candidate with renewed energy.
I think it's going to give the Democrats a much better chance to beat Trump, which I think is the ultimate goal.
They're going to really just have to coalesce and figure out, what the path forward is going to be for the next candidate. I think you're already seeing a lot of the endorsements that are kind of coming in.
Now, with the elections just around the corner, some of these voters told me today that they do think that these 4 or so months are more than enough time for that candidate to lay their proposals on the table and win their vote on the November elections. Reporting live in Boston, Jennifer Sanguano, NBC10 Boston.
All right, Jennifer, thank you very much. Let's talk a little about Kamala Harris. Who is she? Well, she's the vice president. She was born in Oakland, California, to immigrant parents. In 2010, she was elected Attorney General of California, where she oversaw the largest state Justice Department in the country. In 2017, she was elected to the U.S. Senate. 3 years later, she became the first woman, the first Black American, and the first South Asian American to be elected to vice president. Now she finds herself on the precipice of becoming the first woman of color to be nominated for president by a major political party.
That's why we want to turn things over now to NBC 10's Erin Logan. She is continuing our team coverage with more on Biden passing the torch to the vice president. Erin.
Well, Matt and Corey, President Biden said choosing Kamala Harris as his vice president was the best decision he has ever made, so this news is not surprising. However, we're starting to hear mixed reaction over whether she is the best option to lead the Democratic Party in the upcoming election. Now, just yesterday, take a look, Kamala Harris was in Provincetown to raise money for the Biden Victory Fund. Massachusetts State Senator Julian Cyr and State Representative Adam Scanlon were there as Harris took the stage. Both say they were impressed by her, noting she brought a lot of optimism, but also acknowledged this country has a challenging road ahead. NBC 10 spoke with political analyst Scott Ferson. He agrees with Cyr and Scanlon that Harris is capable of running the country, but when asked if she is a stronger Democratic candidate than Joe Biden,
I'm skeptical that she is. I think she's as strong a candidate as Joe Biden. What she is the next generation of leaders in the Democratic Party, in the same way that the Republicans have thrown their lot in with J.D. Vance. So she is that. She's the future of the Democratic Party, and that's the difference.
And Kamala Harris released a statement this afternoon thanking President Biden for his endorsement, and she says she has every intention of earning and winning the nomination. Live outside the State House, Erin Logan, NBC 10 Boston.
All right, Erin, thank you. Still so much more to come on this developing story, including a special edition of NBC Nightly News. Lester Holt is going to have the latest on Biden's decision to withdraw from the race and what this means for the Democratic ticket. That's coming up right after our 6 o'clock newscast. And be sure to stay with NBC 10 Boston for continuing coverage on President Biden's historic decision. You can get the latest updates on air and online at NBCBoston.com.